Our second special set of the year, Shrouded Fable, launches on August 1st in Pokemon TCG Live and focuses on Pecharunt EX and the Loyal 3. Featuring just 64 cards before Secret Rares, Shrouded Fable does have some good cards worth owning, and thanks to that low set size, it won't cost you very much to craft them. I'm going to mix things up this time around and start with the support Pokemon because this is where the most interesting cards in Shrouded Fable are found. Let's start with Fezandipiti EX, which will make a lot of single prize decks more powerful while also helping multi-prize decks get out of awkward Iono situations. The effect of Fezandipiti's Nuts ability is simple and a direct copy of Oricorio GX from the Sun and Moon days. If any of your Pokemon were knocked out during your opponent's last turn, draw 3 cards. Now, instead of having to rely on an evolution like Barrel, you can just have this basic Pokemon help you draw more cards turn after turn. Obviously, it's great in most single prize deck, able to draw you upwards of 15 cards in a duel, but based on Japanese results, Charizard EX, Dragapult EX, Regidrago V-Star, and many Raging Bolt EX decks are all playing your copy as well. And since you can only activate one Fezandipiti EX each turn, you only need to craft one copy at 600 credits. Yes, it's a 2-prize liability, but if your opponent decides to target Fezandipiti, they aren't targeting whatever your main attacker is. So while it can cost you games, the added consistency of a basic Pokemon that will draw you 3 cards most turns is worth the risk. And don't forget that you can always remove Fezandipiti from play with cards like Collapse Stadium, Penny, and Professor Turo. Then we come to the most surprising best new cards in Shrouded Fable, Duskull, Dusclops, and Dusknoir. Thanks to these guys, Charizard EX has returned to the spot of best deck in format, and the reason might shock you. Or it won't. Either way, both Dusclops and Dusknoir knock themselves out, giving your opponent a prize card in the process. That's actually a good thing. When you knock out Dusclops, you can place 5 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. And when you knock out Dusknoir, you can place 13 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. Since there's been a lot of talk about this, let me be very clear. You can only place the damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. They can't be spread anywhere like I spread peanut butter on toast. This effect not only helps fix Charizard EX math, but giving your opponent a prize card boosts Charizard's damage by 30. And if you were tied on prizes at the time of using one of the abilities, Countercatcher and Defiance Band also get activated. Not to mention it makes Iono stronger and gets you closer to a potential Roxanda too. While you can get up to some shenanigans with Dusclops and Dusknoir, like making Dragapult EX even more annoying, according to Japanese results, Charizard EX is by far the best partner for the Dust cards. Using my expert math skills, I've determined that you can deal 290 damage or 340 damage on turn 2 with Charizard EX using this combo. By knocking out a Dusclops, Burning Darkness is boosted to 210 damage. Add in the 50 damage from Dusclops, you're at 260. Slap on a Defiance Band, now it's 290 on turn 2. Or if you can get a Dusknoir turn 2, that's 210 with Burning Darkness plus the 13 damage counters from Dusknoir, letting you deal 340 damage all without a Defiance Band. I would recommend having 2 of each Pokemon in the line for your collection, but 2 Duskull, 1 Dusclops, and 1 Dusknoir does appear to be optimal. I masterfully debated whether or not to include Pecharunt EX in the support or attacking section, but 80% of the time it's there for the abilities, so I put it here. With its ability, once per turn, you're able to switch one of your bench Dark Pokemon with your active. The downside is that the new active Pokemon is poison, but the upside is that you almost never have to worry about losing to a stall deck ever again thanks to this evil piece of Mochi. I have seen Pecharunt thrown into Charizard EX decks for the stall matchup, but the best partners are going to be Okidogi EX and Munkidori EX. If Okidogi EX is poisoned, it does 260 damage. Pecharunt EX poisons Dark Pokemon. The synergy there is more apparent than I am, but because I have at least 2 kids I know about. And Munkidori EX gives up 1 less prize card if Pecharunt EX is in play. Again, the ability is the best part about Pecharunt, though it can deal up to 300 damage at the end of a game, and there's enough good partners that you should be crafting 2 copies. And for the final support Pokemon you want from Shrouded Fable, there's Genesect. If you attach a tool to Genesect, your opponent can't play any A-Spec cards from their hand. Basically, it's a weaker version of the Spiritomb from the Black and White days because you do have to have that tool attached. So your opponent can still Lost Vacuum the tool and use their A-Spec, and Lugia accelerates the Legacy energy from deck, so it's useless there. But still, if your deck has room for Genesect and already plays some tools, throwing in a copy isn't a bad idea. You only need 1 though, and since it's an uncommon, it'll cost just 100 credits. Moving to the attacking Pokemon, we'll kick things off with Okidogi EX and Munkidori EX. Okidogi is the best attacker in Shrouded Fable, able to deal 260 damage for 3 energy if it's poison. Pair it with Pecharunt EX and Janine's secret technique, and that's fairly easy to do. Slap on a Binding Mochi, now it's swinging for 300 damage. Then there's Munkidori EX. If Pecharunt EX is in play, your opponent takes one less prize card, provided it was knocked out by damage from an attack. So it still gives up 2 prizes if Giratina V-Star or Roaring Moon one-hit KO it, or if Dragapult EX or Sableye clean it up with damage counterpanes. For everyone else though, Munkidori EX is effectively a single prize dark attacker that does 190 damage for 3 energy. Just like Okidogi EX, you need 2 copies for your Pecharunt deck, even if I'm still not convinced about the monkey's usefulness. Next up, the Dragons. Kyurem is just a great card. While the attack cost is super awkward, you can make it work in Mirage Date decks if you really want to, its ability makes it potentially insane. If your opponent has either Colress's Experiment or Colress's Tenacity in their discard pile, Kyurem can deal 110 damage to 3 of your opponent's Pokemon for a single colorless energy. So if you find yourself losing to Lost Zone decks with, say, your United Wings deck, just chuck in a copy of Kyurem and level the playing field. But both Kyurem and the new Haxorus pair perfectly with Regidrago V-Star, which is why you'll want 1 copy of each. Yes, Regidrago will have to discard all attached energy when it copies Kyurem's attack, but used properly, you can take all 6 prize cards at once. As for Haxorus, the first attack is good. It allows you to one-hit KO any Pokemon with a special energy attached, except for those with mist energy attached. Dragapult decks running Neo Upper Energy will hate it, same with Lugia V-Star decks. But the clincher is Haxorus' second attack. At the cost of discarding the top 3 cards of your deck, it does 230 damage. Regidrago doesn't have the best options for doing more than 200 damage. Raging Bolt's attack requires energy discards, Giratina V-Star's attack sends energy to the Lost Zone, and Koraidon EX's attack damages your Regidrago. So Haxorus just gives you a slightly safer way to KO high HP basic EX and V Pokemon. While the Ditto from Pokemon Go is still broken in PTCGL, putting the status of United Wings up in the air come Shrouded Fable, the deck is getting a brand new Wang to play with, Dartrix. And best of all, it's a grass type, meaning you have a way of one-shotting Charizard EX. By crafting 4 Dartrix and 2 Rowlet, you give yourself that potential grass attacker. And if you don't want to attack with Dartrix, its mere existence brings the total of all United Wings Pokemon you can put in your deck to 16, or a damage potential of 320 with Ditto before modifiers like Defiance Band and Kieran. One of the cards I'm most excited for in Shrouded Fable is Bloodmoon Ursaluna. I'm sure it'll disappoint me more than my son during his hockey games, but that doesn't mean I can't get my hopes up. The ability is the same as Galarian Zapdos. Slap Ursaluna down onto the bench from hand, attach up to 2 fighting energy directly to it. That's good because its attack costs 3 energy. Hitting for 100 base damage, you deal an extra 30 more for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon. Based on Japanese results, the best partner is Iron Valiant, able to swoop in and rack up damage on any of your opponent's Pokemon, provided you have enough switch cards. Thanks to my cheat sheet, you can see that you just have to put 6 damage counters on your opponent's active to KO a 340 hit point Pokemon. I suggest crafting 4 Bloodmoon Ursaluna, but you can get by with 3. Sticking with the damage counter theme, there's Yveltal. Thanks to Frostlass and Munkidori, spread decks are backed with a vengeance. Problem is, they've had to rely on someone like Spinda as the attacker who gets blocked by Manaphy. With Yveltal, you have a spreader who puts 2 damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon who already has a damage counter on them. And since it attacks for a darkness energy, it stays on theme with Munkidori. Plus, you can Dark Patch to Yveltal, saving your manual attachment for Munkidori. Isn't the world a better place when spread decks are viable again? And for the final attacker worth crafting, get a single copy of Slither Wing. There's nothing terribly exciting about it. Pretty much its sole purpose is to one-shot an Iron Hands EX. Beyond that, it's kinda useless. So yeah, get one, and think about putting it in an Ancient or Lost Box deck, but then never actually do it. 2 Pokemon you should skip from Shrouded Fable are Kingdra EX and Revavroom EX. Despite my initial hopes, Kingdra is just a worse Chien-Pao EX. It takes an extra turn to get anywhere if you use King's Order, and if you somehow manage to power it up, Hydro Pump isn't all that much better than Hail Blade. As for Revavroom EX, I don't know what Creatures was thinking. If you're planning on playing a Revavroom EX deck at any point, go for the Metal one, not the Lightning one, because it sucks. Now the moment you've all been waiting for. No, PTCGL doesn't have basic features like muting your opponent. It's the trainers coming in Shrouded Fable. There's 3 A-Specs in the set, and 2 of them are absolute garbage. You can completely skip Dangerous Laser and Pokevital A. Instead, just get the 1 copy of Neutral Center, which I wouldn't even say is a must-have, but it'd be kind of crazy to not include one of the 3 new A-Specs, right? If Neutral Center is in play, non-rule box Pokemon can't be damaged by your opponent's V or EX Pokemon. That's a great effect, essentially turning every non-rule boxer into Mimikyu. Problem is, it can be bumped by another stadium or sent to the Lost Zone with Lost Vacuum. And if Neutral Center is in your discard pile, it can't be recovered with cards like Silene or Roseanne's backup. The best partner for Neutral Center is the new Copperajah. If it's in the active spot, your opponent can't play any stadiums from their hand. Obviously, they can still Lost Vacuum it or boss someone else into the active and bump it with their own stadium, but if things go well for you, Copperajah becomes a beast. Because it really only pairs with Neutral Center, I can't say Copperajah is a must craft, but the combo is there if you want to give it a try. While the Ace Specs kinda sucked, thankfully a decent amount of the other trainers are worth adding to your collection. Unthankfully, one of them is Xerosic's Machinations. A souped up hand trimmer, Xerosic forces your opponent to discard from their hand until they have 3 cards left. So decks like Lost Box and Stall that typically have 10 to 20 cards in their hand now have to worry about losing everything they've worked for. And regular honest folks like you and me have to worry about having a 3-card hand going into their second turn, which sounds like so much fun. You could always play a copy of the Surprise Spores Among Us, which forces your opponent to discard their hand if you discard Among Us with Xerosic's effect. But if that becomes a thing, they'll just grab her before Xerosic. So yeah, get your beaver set up as soon as you can. Speaking of Colress's Tenacity, which I did several minutes ago, craft at least 2. While nowhere near as powerful as Colress's Experiment, Colress's Thickacity lets you get a stadium and special energy from your deck. That means you could grab something like Neutral Center and Reversal Energy. Or when Stellar Crown comes out on September 12th, you could guarantee yourself a Great Tree plus whatever basic or special energy you want. Again, it's not game-breaking, but it is a great consistency card that allows you to manually search out both the stadium and energy. Remember that Pecharunt deck I talked about earlier? How exactly do you make it work? With Janine's secret technique and Binding Mochi, of course. Janine allows you to accelerate up to 2 darkness energy from your decks up to 2 of your dark Pokemon, though your active will be poisoned if it received energy in this way. As we know, that's a good thing for Okidogi EX and Binding Mochi, so it's an auto-include along with Dark Patch if you want to build the deck. While Janine is great, the fact that it doesn't draw you cards kinda makes it a worse Professor Sada's Vitality. Irregardivore, you'll still want 4 copies, and since nearly every trainer is an uncommon, they're 100 credits each. Binding Mochi, meanwhile, isn't just for dark decks. It can also be paired with the Brute Bond and Ancient Booster combo, effectively ensuring plus 40 damage to any Pokemon you want. So yes, Cloth has a chance to make a big comeback with Shrouded Fable. More Pokemon recovery is never a bad thing, and Night Stretcher fills a hole in Standard. With it, you can either grab any Pokemon or any basic energy from your discard pile and put it directly into your hand. Yes, Super Rod is better overall, but Night Stretcher removes the need to search for the cards you shuffle back into your deck. Craft 4 copies of the Stretcher and be happy. Keeping the night theme, there's Nighttime Academy. Like my ex-wife was in her early 20s, this card is extremely flexible. The effect allows you to put a card from your hand on top of your deck. Used properly, you can power up a Metang, Electric Generator, Gutsy Pickaxe, or Kyurem VMAX. Or for those with Eldegoss-sized brains, you can use Nighttime Academy in tandem with Iono. Now you can place a card on top of your deck that you want to redraw either after your own Iono or your opponent's Iono, lessening the chance of dead hands. Then we come to Power Hourglass. This is definitely a niche card, playable in only a footful of decks, but it can really improve their starts. For Pokemon like Cornerstone Masked Ogerpon and Ironthorn ZX, getting the necessary energy on them isn't terribly easy. Now with Power Hourglass, you can attach it to your active Pokemon, and at the end of your turn, you can attach a basic energy from your discard pile to it. Power Hourglass does seem like a card that would be used for evil more than anything else, powering up stall and control decks, so I'm trusting that none of you will use this card for nefarious reasons. And finally, Cassiopeia. If it's the last card in your hand, you can get any 2 cards from your deck. So item-heavy decks that find themselves with low hand sizes now have a great consistency card. Miraidon EX, for instance, can easily find 2 electric generators now. I mean, it could do that before with Arven grabbing a Jenny and a Forest Sealstone, but now it can do the same thing, except it's more difficult. In fairness though, Cassiopeia on me is arguably a better Peony. Yeah, it has to be the last card in your hand, but it can get any 2 cards, including Pokemon and Energy, whereas Peony was just trainers. And there you have it. Those were all of the cards you need to craft when Shrouded Fable launches on August 1st in Pokemon TCG Live. I'll include a list in the description that you can easily copy and paste into Live to craft all of the necessary cards. For now, try to set aside 11,000 credits for the entirety of worthwhile cards in Shrouded Fable. Since I'm doing this crafting guide a little early, I had to make some educated guesses on the rarities of cards, so the actual total may vary slightly. Also, keep in mind that we'll be getting a new Battle Pass with Shrouded Fable. We don't know what the 2 free decks are yet, but my pilot sense is tingling, and I guess it's probably Pecharunt EX and Kingdra EX. If I'm right, the crafting cost will be driven down significantly since much of it comes from everything you need to build the Pecharunt deck. And since it seemed kind of redundant to make a top 10 best cards video for a set with just 64 cards, much of it filler, I'll just do it here. Fezandipiti EX I believe deserves the top spot because it fits into so many decks and almost immediately makes them better. Unless your opponent decides to be a butt face and knock it out. Dusclops and Dusknoir occupy the second spot because they're the sole reasons Charizard EX is back on top in Standard. And the power of Night Stretcher can't be understated, able to just go and get you any Pokemon or energy directly from your discard pile. The rest of the top 10 is a toss-up. They're all very much playable, but nothing is as immediately powerful as the top 3. If you disagree with my top 10 list, let me know in the comments how handsome I am. And I guess also type out which Shrouded Fable cards you're most excited for. But only that first one will get you upvotes.